The story you're about to hear was never meant to disappear quietly. It was pushed aside, relabeled, and buried under regulatory language so dull most people never questioned it. Yet for centuries, farmers, monks, and subsistence growers relied on a single plant to rebuild dead soil, restore exhausted land, and feed entire communities without synthetic inputs. This wasn't folklore. It was documented, tested, and widely used long before modern agriculture existed. What makes it unsettling is not just how effective this plant was, but how abruptly its reputation changed once industrial fertilizers took over. Stay with me for the next minute, because by the time you understand what this plant actually does to soil, you'll also understand why it quietly vanished from mainstream agricultural conversation. If you study agricultural history closely, patterns emerge. Whenever a low-cost, decentralized solution threatens centralized control, the narrative shifts. Labels change, warnings appear, and suddenly what sustained civilizations becomes dangerous or unapproved. This plant did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it worked too well without permission. Now let's talk about what it is, what it does, and why its story matters today. The plant at the centre of this discussion is comfrey, known historically as Symphytum officinale. Medieval texts referred to it as knitbone, not for superstition, but because of its observable regenerative properties. Monastic gardens across Europe grew it deliberately not as medicine first, but as soil insurance. Comfrey roots grow deeper than almost any food crop, drilling down several feet into subsoil layers untouched by annual plants. Those roots pull up potassium, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, and trace minerals that topsoil alone cannot access. When the leaves are cut and returned to the surface, those minerals are released exactly where crops need them. This is where comfrey earned its reputation as a fertilizer replacement. Its leaves contain potassium levels rivaling commercial fertilizers, often exceeding 7% by dry weight. That matters for flowering plants, fruit trees, and tubers. Traditional growers didn't compost comfrey in the modern sense. They cut it several times a season, laid it directly around crops, and watched yields increase year after year without soil depletion. In practical terms, one comfrey patch could feed an entire kitchen garden indefinitely. You know, you can apply this knowledge today exactly as it was applied centuries ago. Just plant comfrey along the edge of a garden, orchard, or homestead boundary. Allow it to establish for one full season. After that, cut the leaves down 4 to 5 times per year and use them as mulch around tomatoes, maize, potatoes, or fruit trees. Another method, and it's a good one, is to steep the leaves in water for several weeks to create a nutrient tea that mirrors potassium-heavy liquid fertilizers sold today at high cost. The difference, of course, is that this costs nothing and rebuilds soil instead of stripping it. So, why did the FDA step in at all? Here is where history becomes, well, a bit uncomfortable. The FDA never banned comfrey as a plant grown in soil. What they restricted was its internal medicinal use, specifically ingestion. In the late 20th century, studies showed that comfrey contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids, compounds that can cause liver damage when consumed in large quantities or over long periods. Instead of distinguishing between topical use, controlled agricultural use, and internal consumption, regulators chose a blanket approach. Comfrey supplements were removed from the market. The plant was quietly recategorized as unsafe in public perception, even though its agricultural role posed no such risk. This regulatory move had consequences beyond medicine. Seed catalogues stopped promoting it. Agricultural extension programs dropped it from recommendations. A plant that threatened fertilizer dependency simply faded from official memory. Industrial agriculture had no incentive to clarify the difference. Synthetic fertilizer sales continued to rise, while a regenerative alternative was left to private gardeners and survivalists. For historians, this matters because it fits a recurring pattern. The suppression wasn't dramatic. There were no raids or headlines, just a regulatory decision that shifted perception. For survivalists, it matters because comfrey represents a closed-loop system. Once planted, it produces biomass for decades. It requires no reseeding. It stabilizes soil, prevents erosion, feeds pollinators, and regenerates land that chemicals have exhausted. If you're rebuilding soil today, especially in regions with depleted farmland, comfrey is not a miracle. It's something better. It's predictable. You plant it once. You manage it deliberately. You let biology do what industry replaced with chemicals. That knowledge was never lost. It was sidelined. Understanding this plant forces us to confront a larger question. How many other solutions were quietly labelled inconvenient? How much agricultural wisdom was displaced not because it failed, but because it couldn't be controlled or monetized at scale? That's why stories like this belong on this channel. They aren't nostalgia. They're warnings. If this kind of buried history matters to you, if you care about the systems beneath the surface, then you already know what to do. Subscribe to The Past They Hid. Share this with someone who still believes progress only moves forward. And stay with us as we continue uncovering what was never meant to be remembered.